This episode is brought to you by Past Life. Serving in the military is inherently dangerous. Are your affairs in order? The grief a service member's family feels upon learning of their passing is difficult enough, but the days, weeks, and months that follow are filled with stressful decisions. Past Life is a single solution, secure cloud-based platform where funeral preparations, last wishes, will information, financial assets, business continuation information, social media account information, etc., can be uploaded to recipients of the user's choosing. Past Life allows you to alleviate the stress and lift the fog for your loved ones, preeminently by giving them a vital trove of information in multiple areas. Listeners can save 10% by using the code BTU, that's Bravo Tango Uniform, at checkout. Learn more at pastlife.com. That's pass-life.com. Pass your loved ones a lifeline. And just going off script here, I'm so grateful for Past Life support. The way that this worked is they believe in what we're doing. They gave us financial support to continue what we're doing and just asked that we read this before the episode. They gave us free reign to interview anyone we want, and we always have a long queue of people that we're wanting to interview. So thank you so much, Past Life. Definitely check them out. They've been incredibly supportive and grateful for enabling this conversation. Enjoy the episode. Welcome back to Beyond the Uniform. I'm Justin Asiri, and my goal is to help members of the military community thrive in their civilian career. Today's episode number 386, Starting a Business on Your Own Terms with John Schmitt.
One thing I just realized up front, like, man, I don't want to be a toaster salesman, right? I want to have relationships that are far beyond transactional. I want to build partnerships, right? And in order to do that, you have to have genuine interest and understand where people are coming from. I mean, not just, professionally, but on a personal level too. What motivates them? Is it a purpose-driven thing, or is it financial, or what? And I think those conversations really help me kind of figure out where I fit.
I loved hearing John's unique approach to entrepreneurship in life. After 20 years of military service, John was drawn into starting his own business. While starting any company requires sales, John's approach to sales is to simply be curious about whoever he's speaking with and learn about their pain points. This is such great advice for so many different career paths. I also appreciate how John has constructed his life to have a fulfilling family life outside of work life and professional life. As always, at beyondtheuniform.org, you'll find show notes with links to all the things that we talk about in this episode, as well as 380 other episodes just like this one. So with that, let's dive into my conversation with John. Dive. Joining me today in Huntsville, Alabama, my guest is John Schmitt. John, welcome to Beyond the Uniform.
Justin, thanks so much for having me, man. It's great to see you.
For listeners, I'm so pumped. Steve Bain had connected me and John. We were just chatting, I guess, apparently in September, though it feels like 10 years ago, and just enjoyed riffing with him on business ideas and just learning from each other about how to improve in entrepreneurship. So pumped to have you on the show. But for listeners, I want to give a little bit of background. John's a retired Army lieutenant colonel. He served over 20 years as an Aviator and Acquisition Corps officer. Upon leaving the Army, John started his own consulting firm with a focus on biotech, advanced manufacturing, and marketing projects. Additionally, he serves as a board member for multiple local nonprofits. He holds a Bachelor's of Science in Biological Sciences from UC Davis and a Master's of Science in Microbiology and Immunology from Vanderbilt University. So John, maybe to start off, what's not in the public bio that you want people to know?
Yeah, man. So I mean, once folks get to know me, they realize I'm just a 43-year-old skate punk at heart. And when I say at heart, it's because I never actually learned to skate for shit. So, I grew up in a lot of trouble, and hated authority, wasn't really good at following directions. So it didn't make a lot of sense that I joined the military, to be honest with you. It wasn't until, kind of started getting my life back together, later in high school. A good friend of mine, we're sitting around smoking cigarettes on the curb somewhere where we probably shouldn't have been. And there was something he said, and I don't know if he just found it in a book somewhere or whatever, but it's something that really stuck with me and kind of changed the way I view life and really set kind of some true north for me. And he just said, there's no growth in comfort. And and even at that age, like 16, 17 years old or whatever, I realized, how important that was. And so I always knew that I wanted to grow, as a person. And so I had no problem. Once I really took that in, I and embodied it. Like when it was time to consider joining the Army, it was like, man, this does not make any sense. And let's dive in,
That's awesome. I love that. It's not as unusual as I would have thought, but like that kind of story too, of like not the type of person you'd see joining the military, dislikes authority, dislikes structure, things like that. And then to find that that's maybe the missing secret ingredient is pretty cool to see. And you retired as an '05 after serving over 20 years. What was that transition like? What was that decision process like?
Yeah. So, I guess I had a pretty unique career, right? And I think just about every turn, there's somebody saying, "Oh, don't take that turn; it'll end your career." I started off as a Black Hawk pilot, and then I wanted to go be a maintenance test pilot and be a maintenance company commander, and so I did that. And then, I got really frustrated with drive-by fieldings when we were in Iraq, and I wanted to be part of the acquisition corps, so I'd applied. And before then, I got picked up to go teach at West Point. So I ended up going back, got a master's in immunology of all things, thinking I was going to teach biology at West Point. Ended up teaching chemistry, and ended up being the course director of chemistry. And I mean, when they asked me, I was like, dude, I hate chemistry, and I didn't go to West Point. So are you sure you want this dude? Like, and then I came here to Huntsville and have been doing acquisition stuff ever since. And I, frankly, like what I realized was, as I continued in my career, I started serving a greater purpose less and less. And I found myself having to bend kind of my, I had to find myself bending myself to serve people's egos. And I really started to bother me. It was, began serving egos over principle and individual preference over like the logical, scientifically literate decisions, or even what's best for the Republic. Especially on the program that I left in the Army, I was stuck between Congress and big Army, and it was just soul sucking. And I realized it was time for me to bet on me, for me to do the greatest good with my time and energy while we're still on this planet, man. I was like, I got to get out of here. And that's really why I decided. And then, the transition was, I saw it as a new season of life, right? Like I wasn't looking to run away from the Army, but I was like, what do I really want out of this thing? And I found that the transition was actually perfect. So, and not in a good way, just, it was really what I needed to remind me that I made the right decision. So I had, and we've heard these stories, a lot over the years, but I had, was changing command just as COVID hit. So, I gave my speech on Zoom, my retirement speech on Zoom. I found out that I was getting a Legion of Merit, like on my DD 214. Nobody told me. I came home one day and there's like a flag still in like the Army cheesy marked box, on the porch. And I was like, nobody's fault, right? It's a pandemic. We're trying to figure everything out. But it just made me realize that, without that ceremony, it made me realize that the system was just as done with me as I was with it. And it was a great punctuation and time to move on.
I love I love the thought of moving towards something. I love the thought of having that decision reaffirmed. And I love the thought of just wanting to change gears and find a better fit for you in this season of your life, something that's more aligned with what you're wanting to do. How was that search like as you looked for what your next vocation would be like? What was that process like?
Well, the 6 months prior to leaving, I really did took some time to really explore some other options. I'd been involved in music here in town, music promotion and stuff. and, doing songwriting and stuff. And, a company had come here to town and they were building this amphitheater, just been put on contract with the city. And I'd really wanted to do an internship with them. There's this Army program, and I was going to go do that. Ended up not getting support on my command. But it made me realize, man, I really need to figure this thing out. Like, I can't be like, hey, you're going to do music or you're going to do this. I mean, it was just way too scatterbrained. So I kind of had a freak out, and I signed up for one of those mentorship programs. And frankly, it was a dumpster fire. And it wasn't him. He was awesome, right? He was a guy that was just trying to help a veteran, and as I'm describing all these things that I've done over time from, while I was in the Acquisition Corps, I also served as the military deputy to what was at the time AMRDEC, the Aviation Missile Research Development Engineering Center. And so I really got to kind of peek behind the curtain, really at all things, research and development through both commodities of aviation and missile, which really accounts for everything from energetics and material sciences through models and simulation. And so I'd really gotten this really passion for, connecting people through technology. And I'm just describing all these experiences I had. And the guy, they had brought us together because of my interest in entertainment industry. And he was a producer, out on the East Coast. And you could hear it in his voice. He's like, I don't know what you do, And he kept trying to steer me back to things like, well, have you considered applying at Home Depot? Have you considered applying for the police academy? And what I realized out of that whole experience was, here's a guy that wants me to succeed, is dedicating his time and his energy to see me succeed. And I can't even articulate what I do or what my talents are. And that was immensely challenging. And so kind of through that experience, I realized, man, I have so many things I want to do. If I really want to do them, I need to figure out a different way to sort it out, and so there's a big punctuation for me.
It's interesting because it's like, in the absence of your being able to inform someone about what you bring to the table, they almost fall back on the stereotype of how they perceive you. And I'm guessing that's what happened here is like, okay, I'm not getting from you, John, insight into what you're bringing to the table or where you want to go. Therefore, I know Home Depot hires a lot of veterans, and I know that veterans go into law enforcement, which has, neither of those have really anything to do with what you did in the military. But I also empathize with this person, is like, if they don't have a military background, like, they're just going to fall back on what they've seen in movies or read about in the news. And that, clearly wouldn't have been the best fit for you and what you wanted for your life and what your background was. So I love that sense of trying to find a better way to articulate that to someone so they can be better empowered to help you.
Yeah. And so what came out of that was I flipped the script, right? I stopped trying to sell myself, and I started, realizing I love people. I just wanted to, reach out and just meet folks that were kind of outside of my comfort zone and just hear what their challenges were. And what I found was, instead of trying to sell what I could provide them, hearing their challenges and actually asking them, where do you have challenges? I found that there was more than enough places where I could support them. Right. Mm-hmm. And some of those folks ended up becoming clients, and, kind of, that's when I really realized, hey, I do have value, because up to before kind of having that shift, like, now I was freaking out.
Yeah.
I was like, dude, maybe I should go put an application at Best Buy. I mean, maybe I'm not nearly as cool as I thought I was, and I'd always kind of held back on this, this kind of military service exceptionalism, I think, that we all kind of, fall into. And like, well, I've done all this stuff. Clearly you would trust me with, this portion of your business. And it certainly is not a straight line, A to B,
Yeah. I love that though too, because I often fall into, when I'm in a conversation with someone, especially if it's a potential business relationship, I've got this screwdriver of what I do for a living. Let me find all the screws that you need that need tightening, versus right. What it sounds like is just genuine connection and curiosity of like, what challenges are you facing? What are your pain points? And maybe you can help with that, maybe not, but it's like a genuine interest in what they're needing, rather than like, oh, this is the solution that I'm trying to sell you or offer you. And I really appreciate that open curiosity. I imagine it makes for a lot more enjoyable conversations on both sides rather than like, let me hold my breath and listen to you until I can start telling you what I do.
Well, it's like, one thing I just realized up front, like, man, I don't want to be a toaster salesman, right? I want to have relationships that are far beyond transactional. I want to build partnerships, right? And in order to do that, you have to have genuine interest and understand where people are coming from. I mean, not just, professionally, but on a personal level too,
Yep.
what motivates them? Is it, is it a purpose-driven thing, or is it financial, or what? And I think those conversations really helped me kind of figure out where I fit, as I transition.
That's great. And so what led you then to start your own company? Because I can imagine you're having all of these conversations that could go a lot of different ways, but at what point did you decide like, oh, was this something that you always aspired to, or as a child you wanted to be a business owner, or when did that
None of the above.
Yeah.
None of the above. And what I realize is, I'm like, okay, I got to start somewhere. Where are my non-negotiables, right? Because I'm starting to get people asking me if I want to do this, or if I want to come work for them, or hey, would I want to be introduced to somebody and for an interview? And I was like, well, what are my non-negotiables? And I realized I just wanted to add value. Just want to add value, right? For who I am. I'm a lifelong learner and all that, but I really didn't want to like learn bookkeeping or some shit, like something that I know I'd be terrible at. I just didn't want to, find myself in another place, a cycle of learning. I knew that I had enough, experience over the years as all of us do in the military. We're asked to do so many different things, so many flexible, adaptable environments. I knew I just wanted to add value for who I was. So that was kind of my first non-negotiable. My second was I just want to be part of impactful projects. Right. And kind of with those two foundational ideas, I realized that I probably wouldn't be able to work for other people, right? Directly. I would have to make space for those two things. Cause that's definitely some cake and eating it too,
Yep.
And when I looked at this next season of my life and what I really wanted out of it, I knew I wanted to serve my community. I knew I wanted to be present for my family. I knew I didn't want to be on the road, 30 weeks a year again. And it really, in order to stay like focused on all my, crazy philanthropic stuff and interest, like I knew it seemed like the only way. Now I didn't know if I could pull it off, but I knew it was the only way and I had to take a shot.
Yeah. I love that you had your non-negotiables and that led to that insight. That's such a powerful filter when you're able to say, these are the things that matter most. These are the rocks that I'm going to put in the vase before I put in the gravel and the sand and the water. And I imagine that took time to develop those non-negotiables and be honest about what those were. But once you had those, I'm imagining that the subsequent decision process becomes so much easier because you have this almost binary filter of like, does this meet this non-negotiable or not? And if not, even if it's a great opportunity, I have to turn it down.
Yeah, I love that analogy, the big rock analogy. I mean, it's such an important kind of way. And, and being in the military, like, you really don't get a lot of choices what those big rocks are. Yep. Usually,
Yep.
So here I am, I'm transitioning and I'm like, okay, this thing's empty. I got to get on top of this thing. And it's actually why, I realized beyond the non-negotiables, I also kind of, every organization I'd ever been a part of or led or, built, it was a mission, a vision, principles, lanes of effort. And I realized that why wouldn't I do that for myself? If I'm managing these organizations through change, why would I not also apply that same discipline to myself? So I forced myself to build a mission statement and a vision statement and, really think about what I wanted out of this, both, tangibles and non-tangibles. And, building that guiding document made all the rest of the decisions a lot easier. And I put them on a website, so I was held accountable. So I couldn't be like, well, there's a lot of money in that one and maybe I'll give that a whirl. And it's given me a lot of freedom to make decisions kind of on my own terms. And I'm really, really glad that I took that time to do that exercise. And I mentioned that to a lot of folks that are transitioning. They're like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm like, dude, I still don't know what I want to do. But
Yep.
that's a great way is figure out what is important to you. And then you just make your decisions based on that.
I was going to bring that up because, and we'll add in the show notes for listeners a link to your website. But one of the things I really appreciate and respect is how explicit you are in having your own mission, your own vision, your principles. Do you have any advice for? And I'm even asking this for myself, for my own company, because I don't have any of those three things. What advice do you have about how to uncover that? And what was that like for you? Did you like block off an hour, a day, a weekend? Like, how did you come to
Oh,
those for yourself?
yeah. I bet you I probably spent like 100 hours
Wow. Well,
easy.
yep.
And, a lot of it's over a glass of bourbon. Some of it's just walking in the hills, like, over a cold beer while mowing the lawn, like, I think it's important to know what you do, but it's also important to know why you do it. And then you also like really have to think about, where those connect, if it, because there will be places where there'll be gaps, overlaps, and places where they'll just be in diametric opposition. And I think in in sorting those out, it's kind of where the values in my mind came from. It's like, well, if I want to do these things, but this is who I want to be, these are the values I have to set and kind of stick to so that I don't, so that I've made the decision right now in a rational mind. And I'm not having to make that decision again down the road when I'm faced with something that, naturally would place me into like an emotional decision. Like, oh my God, this guy's so cool. I really want to work with them. And then I sit there with regret later because it violated something that I had spent time to think through, and it's not the words on the page, right? It's the exercise of doing it,
Yep.
just like so many things we do. And so I guess to answer your question, the advice, I mean, just sit down and ask what you want and what you want to do and why you want to do it. And then just start there and everything else can kind of flow and you can make it as disciplined as you want.
I love that sense too, that the exercise itself is the value. The resulting words are not really the focus. It's going through that process. And I love this image of you mowing the lawn and going on hikes and just polishing the stone just over and over and over again. And a friend of mine said, I'm sure he took this from elsewhere, but he'd said that, we like people who have firm boundaries. And one of the things I'm imagining is then having this clear mission and values and principles, it makes it easier to set boundaries of like, this is what I want to do. This is the type of person I want to work with. And I can say no to things that don't fit that. And I did want to ask that about you with, how you're able to do that in your business, the power of saying no to what might otherwise seem like appealing opportunities, but it doesn't fit that structure that you've created for yourself.
Yeah. Well, so, I mean, I think we've all seen like the perils of mission creep, right? Is suddenly you're dedicating resources to things you probably are distracting you from the things you're really good at and all that. And so the value statement of saying no to things that are outside of, your vision, mission, values, whatever, is obviously, enormous. But man, doing it and telling somebody no, because I mean, it also gives a really good reason. Like, I want to have relationships based on trust, and I want to have long-standing, relationships. I don't want to have transactional, moments. We're on this rock only a couple more years, realistically,
Mm-hmm.
and it means that you can kind of say no to that asshole, that if you were working for somebody else and they're like, hey, it's a revenue stream. That's another client. You can't say no to that. And I can. And that's, God, man, that's just awesome. Cause I don't have to work with people I don't want to. It's awesome.
I love that too. One of the things I've learned in the last couple of years is that when I have this, there's another quote that I forget who said it, but it's like, when you have resentment, it's a sign that you had a boundary that was crossed or a boundary that you didn't communicate. And I've seen that when I have resentment with a client, with a partner, with anything. In the postmortem, it's like, oh, I actually agreed to do something to make them happy, and it wasn't what I wanted to do, or it cost me more money than they were paying me, or whatever else the resentment is from. And so what's powerful about what you're saying is like, really being deliberate in what energizes you, what saps you, and then be willing to say no. But what I love about the pain of turning down money, turning down possibilities is like it saves you, a triple bypass later in life. It saves you that
Right.
unnecessary stress.
Well, I broke it, right? Like, God, I've been doing this, 8 months or whatever. And about 4 months in, I was like, no, this feels right. And I knew in my heart, I'm like, you don't want to do this. I did it, and it was miserable for like the 3 months that it went on. It came to blows at one point, like just it was horrible. And it just taught me that lesson. I'm like, dude, you really got to stick with this, man.
Yep.
Just say no, I mean,
Yep.
and you know, I, I also recognize that, having a retirement income, from the Army gives me a lot of flexibility,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yep.
it gives you a lot of safety net. At the end of the day, I mean, my family and I, we can move to an apartment and eat ramen, we'll be fine, right?
Yep.
And so it definitely gives you a safety net to be able to do that with. So it's certainly not lost on me that, not everybody can do that right away.
And that gives even more credence to what you were saying earlier of the hundreds of hours you spent thinking on the bedrock and the foundation of your company. It's hard to imagine myself or anyone listening taking time to go on hikes and reflect on the purpose of their company. That is a luxury if you don't have to fight to keep the lights on. And
That's
whether
right.
that's through savings or through retirement or through a side hustle or working somewhere while you earn the ability to start your own company, that is a privilege to be able to have that room to explore and to lay a solid foundation for growth.
Yeah, because of that exact statement, right? Is like I never wanted to take that for granted, and I wanted to make the best of it, right? If I'm going to be given the fortune of and that incredible opportunity, like, man, go all in. If it doesn't
Yeah.
work out, you can always fall back to the other thing, and at least you tried.
Yeah.
And yeah, I certainly want to honor that, especially when I mentor folks that are leaving the military, if they're haven't done that, right? Obviously, folks coming up now are going to have at least partial with their 401k, vested, but the opportunity that I have as a 20-year retiree is, I mean, it's an awesome opportunity.
And I want to ask more questions about your entrepreneurial journey and
Yeah.
kind of growing a consulting company for listeners interested in that. But I want to make sure that we have our own foundation of understanding what you do. So could you give a little bit more information about the type of consulting work that you do and what your company is?
Yeah, sure. So, I have several different clients, right? There's folks that we do, just like direct technology transfer. I grew a passion while I was in the military was that, big companies, they don't do innovation well. And in fact, most of them have their innovative arm completely separate from any of their like functional areas or manufacturing or whatever. And so the transition just occurs, if it occurs at all, is you know disjointed and whatnot. And for what we're facing in the future fight in the DoD, we can't afford that. So I've also gone back to my values. Like, I've partnered with some really, really, really innovative companies that have some really great technology, and my goal is to get them in front of the right people and decision makers to help make technology transfers. And that's in the research and development arm, but it's also in product insertion. And here in Huntsville, we're very fortunate because we have we just got Space Command, which I think we're all trying to figure out what that looks like in the future. But we've got Space and Missile Defense Command, we've got Missile Defense Agency, we've got PO Aviation, PO Missiles and Space, which now AVMIC, which is the largest research lab in the Army for aviation and missile. So you got the home of hypersonics for Army and directed energy for Army. It's all right here. So there's tons of technologists, there's tons of opportunity just to make connection and help raise the visibility of some of these folks that may not necessarily have the abilities of some of these larger companies. But also, like, some of these other places that are just building the flexibility to do unpaid work too has been really important. So one of the companies that we're working with is a company called Past Life, and the CEO, he had an incredible journey, right? He went to it was an AFWorks challenge, an Air Force Innovation Challenge, and he sat with a room full of Gold Star families. And the challenges that they described were just horrible, and as you look at some of the statistics, it's average probate is over 16 months, and at the greatest time of need, I think we all realize that, pre-deployment activities are abysmally short of where they need to be. Most of them are still by paper. It's really up to the discretion of a lieutenant or captain, who's worried about a million other things. And so we developed a product that really to kind of fit that requirement, which is, to meet, modern needs too, right? Some of these stories are, wives that can't get their husband's Facebook cleared, or, don't have access to their phone. And it's just like these basic things that just caused immense turmoil, and the casualty affairs officers couldn't really manage through it. So we did some market research with a lot of casualty affairs officers from different services. And that's the value that we brought, right? Was that military perspective, and able to really start building this product to meet the need of the military family and service member. And that's been really, really, really cool journey. And we actually are live now, and starting to get some signups, and we hope to give people some peace of mind in their greatest time of need. And then, there's other projects that we do, more on the nonprofit side. I'm love to share those too.
I love that I'm guessing that this was a conscious effort to carve out the capacity to do projects that did not bring in income, but yet you believed in the cause. And I just love to learn about how you thought about that, and is this like kind of a 20% thing, or how do you structure that to make sure that you're able to do that without it becoming a distraction or detriment to the business?
Yeah, it's a really good question, right? and it goes back to the mission, vision, and principles. Like I knew, I was mowing my lawn, or sweeping the driveway, or raking leaves, or whatever. Like I recognized at some point that in this next season of my life, I wanted to. I mean, listen, man, we're only on this rock so many years, and I've been very fortunate. I've got a wonderful wife, awesome kids, and I've got my health. And it's important to me to, after a life of service, I'm not just going to give up serving. I wanted to serve my community, and in order to do that, I knew that I had to build the capacity, right? So that's what, and even in the small decisions of building my rate structure and my growth path, like I made a conscious decision based on that need for capacity, not to grow, because I didn't want to build an administrative burden on myself and not, basically give up that capacity for too much overhead, work. And so it's been something that I have to make intentional decisions on every day, to make sure I maintain the bandwidth so I can give my energies to these things.
That's great.
Yeah.
And you touched briefly on the nonprofit side, but I know that you've been very proactive there. I'd love to just kind of hear what that's been like.
Yeah, so very disparate. So one of the projects I work on is Rocket City Civil Rights, which is it's a nonprofit here in town. It started off as kind of a history project. Huntsville, Alabama was the first place to peaceably integrate in the 1960s, and against George Wallace, who's screaming from Montgomery, segregation now, segregation tomorrow. And the story here in Huntsville is really fascinating, in that the economic activism and all that sort of stuff that people of color took on. And they went to the stock exchange and basically, hey, doing business with Huntsville's bad business. Because you remember, this is beginning of the space race. Redstone Arsenal started getting Army contracts, and here we are in a segregated South, and that is not good business. And so kind of through those actions, Huntsville was the first place to peaceably integrate, and first place to have integrated schools in Alabama. And that story really hasn't been told. So especially in the light of what's currently been going on this year, it was really important for me to help, with just organizational skills and whatever my time and energy is to help them move this project to the next step. And it's just been an absolute joy. But then I've got this other one. Early on, I probably about a year and a half ago. I met a guy, is a doctor named Dr. Joe Ng. He's a professor at UAH, and he he was a survivor of a mass shooting at University of Alabama, Huntsville. And during that, after coming out, he obviously suffered with PTS, and he watched this spectrum of resilience among his coworkers. Some of them were totally resilient, like nothing had happened. Others, as we've seen in service, people start, having massive health problems and autoimmune disorders and whatnot. And he recognized that there had to be some sort of immune component to post-traumatic stress. And so he showed me this program, or this initial study that he did, where he took about 100 soldiers, screened it for PTS, and then took their blood. And what he did was an RNA transcriptome analysis. And what that means is, like, if you have an RNA that's in your cell that's present, it means that it's making something. And what these RNAs were making were antibodies. And so in people that were screened for PTS, there was this completely different profile compared to those who weren't. And in fact, there was actually 4 RNA sequences that were over 90% present in these folks who suffered from PTS, and which were 0% present in the control population. So what that meant was there's 4 proteins that exist in people with post-traumatic stress that don't exist elsewhere, and all 4 of those map back to the CDR3 region of the cell, which is the variable region of an antibody. And so we're on a dead sprint, especially with everything going on with COVID and first responders. We're on a dead sprint to get that initial data validated, so that we can build a clinically relevant screening tool. And we think we can make something that's 90 to 95% effective, to inform early intervention. And then we've got a path eventually kind of for personalized medicine. So we're partnering with other folks that are doing therapies and treatment options. And we want to be able to do before and afters and see what sort of treatment options are best, because we're also taking genetic marker information to figure out, because we know that post-traumatic stress therapies aren't 100% effective. We believe that probably lies in, your genetics. So you may have some sort of trauma, whether it's sexual assault or it's a car crash or combat, depending on your genetic makeup. That type of trauma may be best treated by mindfulness or a ketamine or whatever, but everybody may be a little bit different. We're hoping for this path for individualized medicine. But in the meantime, we're sprinting to do this product validation and hopefully get it out to the national lab system.
That's incredible. I just one thing that's coming through for me is, like, you're such a good steward of your time. And, rather than the typical thing that I experience and people I meet with, I think experience is, I've got too many things to do. I've got too much on my plate. I'm overwhelmed. Like, you really seem like you're judicious in how you deploy your time, both in building up your own business, but also contributing to causes that you believe in. But it really comes through for me as, like, this sense of abundance of time and attention, and just being really deliberate of, like, I want to give a portion of my time to pay things forward and to help others in need. And that makes me feel good. And I want to spend part of my time building my business. And it's just like a very beautiful way to see this portfolio of how you expend your energy.
Man, I really appreciate you saying that. Yeah. I mean, the one thing that kind of, I think, drives me to that, right, is, early on in my career, especially after first deployment to Iraq, I was very, very cognizant of this, of the civil military divide. If you remember, like, around that time, there's a lot of articles coming out, and Robert Gates, actually, his farewell speech at West Point when I was teaching there, actually, that's what he spoke about. He chose to speak about anything, but he spoke about the civil military divide. And it was very obvious and important to me throughout my military career to participate in the society I served. And I think throughout that journey, it made me realize, being intentional and finding really awkward conversations. People don't understand you, right? They don't. We know we have a unique life journey, and it's really uncomfortable to share that and tell that story with other folks. But I think that skill set having conversation without pretense and just, trying to have a shared understanding made me realize, some of these intangible skills that I had developed over the years, whether it be program management or it just be, kind of being able to talk blaming about science. I saw this place where I could continue to serve and push it. And I'm so grateful for it, man. Like, and don't get me wrong, man, I get stressed the hell out, and, I do, like we were talking right early on, man, for the conversation, like, I got to find time to just throw my phone in a closet and walk out the door and not think about anything. Cause if you're always giving for others and, working on projects, like where's the space that you get to live your life? And I think it does take intention.
Totally agree. And the last nonprofit you were talking about deals with PTS, and curious, you've spoken publicly about your own journey with PTSD and specifically how music and philanthropy has helped that. I'd love to make space for anything you want to share with listeners about that.
Yeah. I think in being in this space has made me really, put a mirror to myself in a lot of ways. Cause I think, there's, in the 20 years that I was in, there was a stigma and that was accepted and there was a stigma. And I think at least people in my peer group and, years, like, dude, we never told anybody anything because, you didn't know if that was going to be the end of your career when the pendulum swung back. And so I stuffed a lot of stuff down, and, started seeing, effects of depression. And, it turns out like you shouldn't be sitting there hanging out with your kids and having suicidal thoughts. Like it took me a long time to figure out that's just it's not healthy. Right. But I didn't really have a support system because I never really set one up. And when I moved here to Huntsville, and I never really talked to anybody either. I had met a friend of mine, Alan Little. So we put out an album out there just before COVID. But we had started kind of hanging out, and our daughters were friends, and he asked with that genuine curiosity, somebody had never served and never really understood, and he asked me, and I don't know, a couple drinks in, and I just kind of let loose with him, like some of the hairy stuff. And obviously look back at that now, it's just the definition of exposure therapy. But something about songwriting, right? In that it's not just telling the story, it's recalling the sights, the sounds, the smells, the relevance of every action. And it really kind of forces you to re-experience in a way that I don't know that I could replicate somewhere else. And when a song we wrote, it was called War Without End. It was about one of many really hard things for me. It was, survivor guilt and trauma and just seeing gnarly shit. And when he performed that song in front of like 200 people or so, I bawled. I felt like I was exhausted. I felt like I had just, it was so cathartic. And that was when I realized I got to get my shit together, man. I need real help, right? Listening to a song in an amphitheater is not where you should lose your shit. And it was really, a call to action for me to go seek help and go on that journey. And that was so important. And, staying involved with that community has really kept me, empathetic and shining a light on myself. And, because I want to be here for my family. I don't want to end up spiraling or self-medicating in a way that's self-destructive, because there is hope and there is help. And, as we learn more and more, like in this initiative, we know that we can help. We just got to get there,
Yep.
Yeah.
I love that. The two things that come up for me is first of all, I love this sense of the ways in which we as people numb out and self-medicate. And that could be alcohol, that could be drugs, that could be TV and movies, and just all of the things where we're like feeling whatever, overwhelm, sadness, anger, whatever. And we choose to numb out, we choose to ignore it. And I bring that up because I feel like my fear when we talk about these topics on the show is that if someone is not in extremis, if someone's not contemplating suicide, if someone's not diagnosed with PTSD, if someone's not diagnosed with depression, that they may write off what we're talking about. And yet I feel like all of us experience things in our life where we can numb them out, where we can just kind of turn the volume down in a way that's, I don't think there's anything wrong with alcohol, with drugs, with any of these things. But I think that if you are using them to escape repeatedly, there's something there. And so I love that you are highlighting that. But more importantly, I love the one of my mentors, John Wineland, says, make art from your suffering. And I love that you did exactly that you used music, you used art to mine the mountain of this very painful experience. And like you said, that exposure therapy of revisiting it and really facing it rather than suppressing it. And it's so great to hear how music was an avenue to do that. That's not the typical story that I hear.
Yeah, and the more that I like, the more that we have conversations with other professionals in the mental health space as part of the Inner Defense Initiative, the realization that there's a separation between body and mind is so just silly, right? Yep. And we talk about, I mean, I've had an old timer straight up just telling me I was being a pussy, right? I mean, and what, you're gonna blame this on your genes now? And I'm like, to me, the 5-year vision would be this, is that as regular part of treatment, you take a test, because it's what we're doing is we're evaluating a pathology, no different than like a cholesterol test, right? Nobody's saying those kind of things about you because your LDL's too high, but it informs thoughtful discussions with your healthcare provider, and it makes you, consider health choices and to seek best possible outcomes. And what we hope is that through this is this simple test that just helps reduce the stigma, because either you have it or you don't. And if we catch it early, the best possible outcomes are greatest with early intervention. Mm-hmm. And as we go down this process and we, intentionally acknowledge that this is a physiological pathology, it changes the whole options for treatment and how we measure it. And I 5 years from now, man, I hope that we don't even have this conversation like this.
It is absurd. It's like, the power through mentality. I'm like, man, if you're driving a car and you have a light saying you have a flat tire, it's not like power through. It's like, no, I'm using feedback from this device to realize it is performing suboptimally. Doesn't make it a bad car, doesn't make me a bad driver. I have a flat tire and I'm going to get that fixed, because then I can go 40 times faster with less wear and tear, versus powering through. And then you have suspension problems and all these other things that I don't even understand about cars. But it's like, I don't understand either why we have this mentality of ignore it and assume that there is something wrong with the system if there is one component that is just different than most people's. And
absolutely.
What advice do you have, as someone who has not only started a company, but started a company on your own terms, and then third of all, started a company on your own terms in one of the most difficult recent environments to do that with just COVID and everything going on. What advice do you have for listeners who may want to start their own company?
Yeah, first and foremost, bet on yourself, right? I mean, I think we hear that, it's a little cliche, but I mean, really, I would say go back, build that mission statement, build your vision, figure out what it is you want out of the season of your life. And if you want to clock in and then go ski all day, dude, you probably don't want to start your own business, right? And I think that those hard conversations, not what you should do, because we've been told what we should do our whole Army career. You should be promoted, you should go to this school, you should do that. But if you really think about what you want to do, and if you want that extra stress and you want kind of the extra flexibility and all those good and the bad that comes with it, then do it intentionally. That would be my best advice. And then consulting, it means a lot of different things to different people, right? It's to me, I think defining it is probably the most important thing in this journey. Was really all I'm doing is providing subject matter expertise or skilled labor for folks that don't want to pay for full time,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I think if you scope it like that, and then you're willing to have those awkward conversations, then I mean, everybody needs help. Everybody, the skill sets that we build in the military, whether you're an E1 or an O8, like we learn flexible, adaptable thinking. We learn risk management, risk tolerance. We learn how to just build teams and work in very non-standard situations. Man, that is a gift and a skill that everybody needs. If you try to sell it, it sounds weird sometimes, but if you don't, if you just hear what people's needs are, you can probably fill them. And so I think if all that sounds exciting, I mean, there's certainly a place for it. And
one thing that just dawned on me that's so powerful about what you're saying is, especially for someone who's starting a new company or someone who's trying to market their skills. So often on the show, we talk about figuring out what your story is, what you're going after, and having that message crafted. What's powerful as an alternative to what you're saying is if you're just really curious and present to what people are sharing, that they have a problem that needs solving, and you're willing to be honest about where you might help, or maybe that's not in your skill set, that's pretty incredible, because you're literally just saying like, okay, you just said 5 things you're looking for. I think I could actually help with one of those. And this is how I would go about it, and this is what I do. It like you said at the start, it flips the script. Rather than like me trying to explain to you what I do, it's more of like, let's not even worry about that. What's going on? What's going well? What's not going well? Hey, I heard you said this is not going well. This is how I would approach that. That's just like that's a very powerful concept of just not even having to articulate what your product or service is, having to just be curious about what their need is. And if there's a way to solve that, then you just talk about that. And it's crazy too, because I was literally having a conversation where someone was like, well, with one type of customer, I do this, with another customer, I do this, and I never know where to start the conversation. And you just solve that. It's literally like, okay, let's figure out what they need. And I don't have to pitch them one or the other. It's literally just being honest with them about where I might be able to help.
Yeah, well, and honestly, it came out of necessity, man. I am horrible at self-promotion. Like, it's the last thing I think about. It's a hot mess when I try it, and I recognized that years ago,
Yep.
And I knew that whatever I did had to be devoid of that, because I just suck at it.
That's
right.
great. Yep.
So, and I think both work, right? I mean, I think both work phenomenally. And it just I knew where it worked for me.
That's fantastic. What resources would you recommend for listeners? Anything that's helped you personally or professionally? Books, podcasts, movies, anything at all?
There is literally one book. Whenever somebody goes, well, hey, what would you recommend? So Getting to Yes by Roger Fisher and William Murray. Man, I read that, oh my God, I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever it was. But just the idea of, in a conversation, of building it around principle and not position, it changes the way that I've dealt with almost every interaction, especially even in the government, when I'm, working with big OEMs, or I'm working with the contracting folks, or, all these people especially people that you don't actually have, you don't have direct influence over, right? You're just influencing indirectly. That concept of being able to look at things principled and not, is that even a word? Principled versus, positional, man, it just changes everything for me. And that book has really impacted my whole life, my whole professional life, for sure.
Beautiful. I'll add that in the show notes at beyondtheuniform.org for this episode. I want to make space for our final question, just to open it up. There's a ton we've covered. I'm really grateful for your thoughts around sales. It's something top of mind for me with my own company, and you've given me an alternate perspective that's really powerful. And I've been doing sales for 10 years, so I'm very grateful for that, as well as your example of just your stewardship of your time, and how you really do come across as like kind of the master of your own domain. Like, you're choosing what to do. And I know I'm not trying to oversell you as like this bulletproof hero, but there's a strong component that comes through on that's powerful, rather than like I fall into the victim, or I fall into feeling overwhelmed and like my schedule is being taken from me, rather than this is the deliberate deployment of my time towards what I believe in. But I do want to just open up and see, you know, what else would you like listeners to know, or anything you'd like to retouch on?
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's really, really flattering. I mean, I appreciate it. And so to the sales aspect of that, like I'm really bad at, and I tried it a couple of times, right? I used to work at a hardware store and I couldn't sell anything unless it was something I really cared about, right? And learning that storytelling and that narrative that it makes me passionate, like that's where I'm at. So I'm actually a shitty salesman, like terrible, unless it's something I fundamentally care about. But there's one thing I just wanted to share in general, and it's something that's actually guided me, for years, but definitely through my transition and through this weird time is I found it in my grandfather's stuff. It was a letter from General Wainwright at headquarters of the Fourth Army. So my grandfather came back from Iwo Jima, and he was, discharged, and he given this letter, right? And it's a really, really powerful letter. But I think, for folks that have been through, 20 years of war and seen what we've seen, I think it's just an important perspective. It's just as true as it was then. It is today as it was then. You mind if I just read a couple of parts?
Yeah, please do.
Awesome. So you have seen in the lands where you have worked and fought, and where many of your comrades died, what happens when the people of a nation lose interest in their government. You have seen what happens when they follow false leaders, and you have seen what happens when a nation accepts hate and intolerance. It goes on to talk about, back in civilian life, the opportunity for leadership is yours, and the responsibility is yours. Start being a leader as soon as you put on civilian clothes. If you see intolerance and hate, speak out against them. Make your individual voices heard, not for selfish things, but for honor and decency among men, and for the rights of all people. And I just love that. And it's just something to reflect that, the power of service and what we value and what we add to our communities, right? It's as old as the nation itself.
I love that. That's a frame-worthy letter. What a great, incredible heirloom to have passed down. If listeners are interested in getting a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
My cell phone number's on my LinkedIn page, but John at schmittconsultinggroup.com. I'd love to chat with anybody, or if there's any place that I can help you, or just love to meet new people and new experiences.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And thanks for all the advice and perspective for the Beyond the Uniform audience.
I appreciate you, Justin. Thank you for all you do here, man. I mean, your podcast was a big help of keeping me centered and grounded through my transition as well. I appreciate you, brother. Surface.
Beyond the Uniform is written and produced by me, Justin Asiri, with the help from our Chief of Staff, Steve Bain, our editor, Lex Brown, and our Head of Social Media, Janelle Hanf. We are an all-volunteer organization and would greatly appreciate your help in any of the following ways. First of all, spread the word. Beyond the Uniform has over 380 podcast episodes and 15 on-demand webinars, all offered for free. Help us spread the word on social media, at military bases, or whatever gets this resource in front of the men and women who need it. Positive reviews on iTunes go a long way towards this as well. Second of all, sponsorship. Beyond the Uniform relies on sponsorship to keep us going. There is so much more we'd like to do, but just don't have nearly the resources to do it. If you know of a company that would advertise in any way with Beyond the Uniform, please send them our way. Third of all, donations. If you're in a financial position to donate, you can find more information on the support section of our website. At our website, beyondtheuniform.org, you'll find over 380 episodes categorized by industry, functional role, and more. You'll also find both free and for-purchase resources that take a deeper dive on topics related to career growth. Thank you for your support as we aim to help members of the military and their families thrive in their post-military career and life.